Welcome to episode 130 of the Half Point Per Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Riggs, joined as always by my co-host, Dalton Willie, and our producer, Johnny Pham. It is so nice of Dalton to take the time away from brewing teas in his newest video game, his newest RPG that he's playing, to be on this podcast with us, Johnny.
Well, we're both out of the fantasy playoffs, Evan, so you better get to brewing some tea too.
Damn.
Uncalled for.
I lost last week too. It's fine.
That was an early shot. Not even 80 seconds into this pod. Just taking shots already.
Johnny, have I mentioned one time that Dalton is 1-13 in our Dynasty League? I haven't. I haven't mentioned that one time.
I didn't know that was his record.
History
I didn't know that was the record.
Bill Belichick's got to go down as one of the greatest coaches in history. Has he had a rough couple of years? Absolutely. We all have.
He has not won one game in a year, though.
That's just not right.
No, that he's saying he's never only won one game.
The season's not over. Job's not done.
All right. Before we get into it, which we do have a fun show today, we're going to do a little start-sit stream as teased in the thumbnail. Look ahead to this week a little bit. We're also going to talk some Dynasty values, do a little head-to-head for a handful of guys. I think that'll be a fun conversation. But, we don't really have a Christmas theme to this episode. It kind of occurred to me this morning that this is actually our last podcast before Christmas. So I'm not going to try and wrangle in any kind of Christmas segment here, but just what I'm curious where you guys are with the Christmas dinner, because that's like a topic right now being voted on in my family is what we're going to have for Christmas dinner. Do you guys have like a set tradition, or do you guys change it up every year? Like what's on the menu this year?
I usually celebrate Christmas with a lot of Mexicans. So it's New Year's, it's Christmas Eve. That is Christmas Day. There's always tamale making at night, which is like a 5-hour long process.
Are you going to Salina?
Yes, I am. Don't dox me.
I'm not doxing you. I didn't say who you were going with or where you were going.
Yes, that's where I'll be though.
Johnny?
We will not be doxing Dalton as much as I want to. I know he'll be able to dox me back. We don't really have a tradition or like food stuff. I know like Kaylee wants to get like sushi on like Christmas Eve, but not really anything Christmas Day planned.
Mm-hmm.
Probably be like similar Thanksgiving food is the idea, or I feel like general consensus.
We've done that a lot. Similar Thanksgiving food, like instead of turkey, we'll do ham, and that was one of the things up for vote this year. Ham currently only has one vote so far. That is from my wife. The other, which is steak, is leading the way right now. I think that's going to win, so I'm excited for that potential. We've done crab legs a lot in recent years too. Crab legs, a good Christmas dinner. We're actually going to do the Christmas Eve thing too, because the Chiefs play at noon on Christmas Day, so that makes cooking
the NFL started a war on Christmas this year. It's a little upsetting.
It's already tough for me because there's the NBA, but just to put the Chiefs specifically at noon makes it difficult.
And New Year's Day too.
Yeah,
like, we're gonna be watching that slate hilariously hungover.
And on that note, let's jump into some start-sit stream for the semifinals of the playoffs. I have a couple topics that we can touch on if we don't at any point in this segment, Dalton. But first, let's just start with our starts of the week this week. Who is the guy that you are looking to get in your lineup for the Week 16 matchups?
Well, I'm stealing from the chat a little bit here because it is none other than James Bartholomew Cook. Who's been on an absolute tear.
There's no chance that's his middle name.
It definitely is not, but it's Christmas Eve. But since Joe Brady has taken over the play calling in this offense, he's been electric. He's been the fantasy RB3 since the firing and the hiring of Joe Brady. He is a league high, and this is why it's pretty important this week, 671 rushing yards on gap rush designs, according to fantasy data. And the team they play this week, the Los Angeles Chargers, are the third worst in running back success rate against man gap runs and has allowed a league high 11 rushing touchdowns against those looks. So I expect another run heavy output from the Bills. This Chargers defense is lackluster at best. And I think James Cook is going to absolutely eat. Also, since week 10, this Chargers defense has allowed 17 points per game to running backs they have faced. And the list that they have faced is not exactly the best running backs in the league. So I am a firm believer that James Cook's going to do what he did last week and yet again tear it up for his fantasy managers and come back. Just saying, since he received the Stop Pooping Award from me about 5 years ago, he has stopped pooping.
What did you say? I missed the first half of that because I was Googling James Cook's middle name. Did you give the specific splits like post Ken Dorsey firing?
No, I don't have those exactly.
I don't either, but I know just bottom line is he is a lot more involved as a runner and as specifically as a pass catcher and just running more routes, getting more targets. Like he has been an elite fantasy option since we've had that change. So 2 funny things happened when I Googled James Cook's middle name. Number one, I discovered there is a Captain James Cook who was a British explorer. That came up quite high on the Google search, which was shocking. 1728 to 1779. Pretty long life for the 1700s. And then James Cook, his middle name is Dalvin. And then Dalvin's middle name is James, apparently.
That's just lazy parenting.
Dalton, I have 2 questions to you. I've been meaning to bring this up for hours now. Who was your start of the week last week?
Anyways, Evan, who's your start of the week?
No, I want to hear. I want to hear.
No, I was just wanting to confirm who your start of the week was.
There's no need for us to go into that at this
point.
Wait,
was it Derrick Henry? I know Derrick Henry was mentioned.
It was Derrick Henry, so take that with a grain of salt, everybody.
No, my start of the week last week was Zach Moss, but
that's true. Well, that worked out poorly because he got hurt. But he did say Derrick Henry was a smash, which I've got this queued up and ready. Dalton just needs to stop talking about Derrick Henry.
It's literally the opposite of what I say.
Yes, every time.
If Derrick Henry's outside of the top 20, I want you each to rue this day.
Yeah, we'll clip this. We'll clip this whole thing. We'll make it into a whole video. It'll be great.
And rue this day. He was outside of the top 20 last week.
Yeah, but that was like season long. That wasn't for a week. I'm about to look up what it is season long after this. My star of the week this week, Jimbo Slice is going to love this segment because I'm also going with another guy on his Dynasty team in our league. That is Devonta Smith. He's Fantasy Pros wide receiver 17 this week, and I honestly would have him pushing wide receiver 1 territory. It may be tempting to give him a rest because he's had back-to-back 7.8 point games exactly, but he's been double digits in 5 of his last 7. Do the math. That means he was 5 in a row before the last 2, had a couple of 20-point games. The Giants are 29th in the NFL against receivers, giving up 38.3 points per game to the position, and they're actually very good against tight ends. We've talked a lot about the Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith deal. Just with the way this is lining up on paper, it would seem like Dallas Goedert more likely to be held in check. AJ Brown and Devonta Smith probably both going to have pretty nice games today. And I know it feels like the sky is falling in Philly. Things are definitely not going well the last couple of weeks, but it really feels like this is the ultimate bounce back. Philly wins this game by 1,000,000 points. AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, DeAndre Swift, maybe even Dallas Goedert. All those guys I feel like could eat and have huge games this week. So do not give Devonta Smith a week off in your lineup because he's disappointed the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever been a get-right game, it is 1,000% the New York Giants. Derrick Henry is the RB8 right now, and he doesn't have 1,000 rushing yards. If you want to know how that position's going this year.
Maybe next year. Maybe next year he'll be outside that top 20. I'm going to keep that clip locked and loaded. So we will play it for you. When he's outside the top 20 in the season, we will play it. You'll have to.
I don't even think he's a Titan next year. So.
Which might be helpful. Although I did have the thought the other day, everybody wants to send him to Baltimore. It's like everyone that is in that Baltimore backfield just dies. So maybe we just not. Maybe we just not do that.
I don't know what goes on in the water in Baltimore, but it kills running backs.
But so Devonta Smith, you're feeling pretty good about it?
Yes, I'm feeling great about it. I mean, it is kind of concerning that Christian McCaffrey pops in on the Manning cast, and it's just like, yeah, they're running a QB sneak here. It's Jalen Hurts with the middle, and the tight end's going to slide in, and they do exactly that. And it's like, well, maybe we need to get a little more creative in Philly, but I don't think, creative or not, that the New York Giants defense is going to have an answer for those receiving options, and it's probably going to be a smash week for that entire offense.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Agreed. All right. Sit of the week.
I'm going to be honest with you here.
Okay. I appreciate that very much.
I have nothing to support this, but it's Bijan Robinson. That's it. It's Bijan.
You know,
I'm just not doing it.
That was one of my quick topics. If we didn't get to it, was, and I actually forgot to write it down, so I'm glad you said it. Is, are you going back to Bijan this week after he scores? I have to double check this. -0.1 points last week.
It's not even that. It's just
it's a little bit that.
Well, actually, it is that. It's Arthur Smith. Like, he's worse than like a teenage boy at deciding what he wants. It's different every week. He comes out and he's like, we're going to get it right or we're going to die trying. It's like, Arthur, you have 3 first-round picks on your offense that you just didn't use in the fourth quarter.
Shout out to the Panthers. I begged last week. I said, Panthers, please. And they beat him. And guess what? They're still saying he might not lose his job. So that just means we need it to happen again.
It's just absolutely terrible. After that fumble, which it wasn't a good fumble, but he got hit in the side and a helmet hit the ball. Like, those happen in games. You shouldn't have been in a 6-9 game against the Panthers in the first place if you are a playoff contending team. And after that, Bijan Robinson had no touches. There were 5 carries in total given in the fourth quarter. They were given to Cordarrelle Patterson and Tyler Algier. Tyler Algier is averaging a whopping 3 yards per carry.
Yeah, it was like, right now, and it was like 14 carries for 45 yards. So it wasn't like he was being particularly effective in that game. And now Bijan was 7 for 11, so it's not like he was being effective either. But you just, like, what are we doing here? You're in must-win game. I saw someone tweet this. I don't remember who, but it's like he just wanted to prove how smart he is. I'm going to beat the Panthers without using any of my good players after what I did last week, and I used my good players. Watch this.
And boy, did he show us. Hopefully he's on his way to firing. But if you survive that in your fantasy playoffs, I can't rationally advise anybody to start him. And if you have even like a borderline top 24 running back, it's probably worth your consideration to start him or over Bijan Robinson.
So let's play a name game then, because I'm looking at Fantasy Pros consensus ranks right now. And Bijan is up at RB8. He does get the Colts, which is a matchup that you mentioned that you liked, or just in the Steelers game with Zach Moss, you liked the Colts because the Colts run a lot of plays. Yep. So that theoretically should help Bijan. Let's just look down the line here. You know, Bijan or Derrick Henry, another guy who had a historically bad game last week. Derrick Henry.
They didn't go away from Derrick, so we're going Derrick.
Derrick Henry is the RB11. He gets Seattle, which is also a nice matchup. I'm going Derrick Henry as well. Isaiah Pacheco in his first week back after a couple weeks away, or Bijan.
Pacheco.
Going Pacheco too. Travis Etienne, which it feels like he has to score a touchdown at this point to have a good day, or Bijan.
Etienne.
I think so too, but we're getting closer for me. I'll skip a few more down. Here you go. Ezekiel Elliott against Denver, or Bijan.
Zeke.
I'll go Bijan there. I want to see how far down I have to go for you. David Montgomery or Bijan.
David Montgomery.
Chuba Hubbard or Bijan.
Since Frank Reich has been fired, Chuba Hubbard is averaging 24.7 opportunities per game.
So Chuba. Yes. Austin Eckler against the Bills or Bijan.
Going with Austin Eckler here. This isn't even a bit. I would start all of these players over.
No, it's good to know. So like I literally am going to see how far down this list I can get. Devin Singletary or Bijan. And Devin Singletary plays Cleveland this week.
You know, Devin Singletary is the only running back in the NFL with multiple 30-plus opportunity games.
Yeah, I believe it.
Devin Singletary.
Najee Harris or Bijan against the Bengals.
I'd go Bijan.
So Dalton says he'd go clear down to the RB29 before he gets to Bijan Robinson this week.
Yeah, and Like Tajay Spears is RB33, and I would consider it.
Yeah, I have a little more. I think just in general, I side a little bit more with start your studs, and you side a little bit more with matchups.
Is he a stud?
I mean, he's the RB12 on the season, so yeah.
RB scoring over the season is fake. Change my mind. It's a marathon on if you're healthy all season.
So, like, I'm starting him. I'm feeling horrific about doing it, but I'm starting him this week. But also, like, I don't think it's impossible. Like, I would start Chuba over him too. So even though I said I would start, who did I say? I don't remember who. Well, I would start him over David Montgomery. I
It was
think.
Zeke.
Oh, it was Zeke. Like, I would start him over Zeke, but I would start Chuba over both those guys. But so he'd be like closer to 20 than 10 for me, and he's the RB8. So we're both lower on him than consensus this week. You're just saying get away from him if you can. I'm saying you probably can't get away from him, and like maybe you hit good on waivers with a Chuba, or maybe, and we'll talk about this maybe in a minute, if Zach Moss plays and no Jonathan Taylor, or if Jonathan Taylor plays and no Zach Moss, which right now, just scrolling these ranks, Jonathan Taylor is the RB27, Zach Moss is 57. So the ranks right now are presuming Taylor will play. But yeah, so my sit this week, this is one that I tried to go bold. I don't even want to say this is a sit at all costs, but I'm looking to pivot if I can. And that is Courtland Sutton. Like, I just don't want to play a receiver in that Patriots-Broncos game unless I have to. Like, this kind of checks all the boxes for things that make you nervous. It's the lowest over-under of the week at like 34. We've talked about that.
Are you going to say what I want you to say?
I don't know. What do you want me to say?
Oh, it's a weather game.
It is a weather game. I was actually going to mention that. I should have known. That's what you want me to say. There's a weather game. We know how the Patriots roll, and that even though they're not good against receivers on the year, they will sell out to take away your top option. We just saw it with Kelsey. Now, could Kelsey have caught a touchdown pass this week and made his day? Yes, he could have. But also, it wasn't like the Chiefs were able to pepper him with targets like they usually are. So we are going to see them, I think, identify Courtland Sutton as the guy they're going to take away in the passing game. Will they be able to do it? Obviously not a guarantee. If Sutton scores a touchdown, which he very well could because he's had a lot of ridiculous catches, he's going to make his day. But I think it's touchdown or bust for Sutton, who I've seen like a top 15 to 18 receiver. And I just feel worse about him than that this week in a bad weather game with a low over under against the Patriots, knowing their tendencies as a defense.
Yeah, I feel that. The thing with Courtland Sutton is he's just doing it every week.
Yeah. I mean, he scored 9.1 points or more in all but one game this year. So he's been very consistent.
I wouldn't start anybody else on either team that catches the ball as a wide receiver.
He's the only one you're thinking about for sure.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. I think the only startable players in that matchup are probably Sutton, Williams,
and Zeke.
And then maybe Hunter Henry.
Yeah, if he plays. I don't know his status after getting hurt last week.
Yeah, but I agree with that. And it's supposed to start snowing Saturday night and roam into the Sunday game for the Denver Broncos. So
I knew you'd have a
detailed
breakdown for me.
I knew this way ahead of time. So it's probably going to be like an actual snow game, and we know that always impacts passing negatively. And it impacts passing even more negatively when you have game manager Russ against Bailey Zappi. I don't have a name for him, but he's not good.
Zap Attack? Isn't that
Zap Attack?
There will not be snow.
No snow. Wow. So Dalton just was making that part up.
There will be snow.
I promise you, I'm fairly confident that there will not be an inch of snow on the field.
Well, that may be true, and it may be off the field. That gives us all a reason to tune into this game to see what the field looks like. Other than that, I was not flipping this game on.
No, I'll see a clip if there is snow. That's the only reason that I will turn that game on, and just to prove Dalton wrong.
You should check in with your local 9 News meteorologist, Johnny Chris Bianchi. Broncos game on Sunday will be snowy. But I'd lean towards a lighter snow event, but it could be heavier if the storm slows. Anyways, thank you. You can apologize later.
That sounds like a Vernon report if I've ever heard one. All right. Dalton, your stream quarterback of the week this week.
We're going back to the well, buddy. Jake Browning. He did it last week. He'll do it again.
Boy,
this week.
it was looking like it was going to be heartbreak for 3/4 of that game. I watched but I was home and aware of what was going on for the first 3 quarters. Got in my car, drove to Kansas City. By the time I got to my destination, the Bengals were tied and we were back to the overtime. I was like, what in the world happened? But he did do it. He did it again last week.
He did it. And did part of it come down to T. Higgins having an absolutely insane touchdown? Yeah. But that's what you get when you have weapons like that. Also, just a terrible week for me last week with start sit. My sit last week was Gus, who had 13 points because Keaton gets hurt. Yeah. And then you have Zach Moss looking like he's going to have a good day.
Yeah, I mean, he had 10 points early in the second quarter. Yeah, so
he gets hurt. Jake Browning plays 4 quarters of football that aren't the greatest and salvages his day at the end of it. And also has one of the worst pass attempts I've ever seen in the NFL. So
if we're going to revisit start sit last week, James Conner, tough call. He scored a touchdown, which is just kind of, he's going to live or die off touchdowns in tough matchups like that. So that just went the wrong way. But if you start Devontae Adams, you're happy. If you start Chris Godwin, that was easily his best game of the season. So I'm quite happy with the somewhat lucky, but somewhat just betting on regression call on Chris Godwin last week.
The thing is, the Devontae Adams train was wild. They had like 42 points before he scored a touchdown. It took Jacoby Myers throwing the touchdown pass to him.
Yes, I was melting down during the game. We both were because we both had up on different teams.
Yeah,
like
we
it's
both
like
lost. Surprise.
It's like, come on, like we're getting all these wide open touchdowns. We got this dude who did not catch the touchdown in the back of the end zone that they called touchdown. Could have been a Devontae touchdown on that play. So yeah, that was the thing, but still worked out. All right, Jake Browning. Mine, I'm going not back to the well for me, but I am chasing the hell out of these points for Baker Mayfield this week after a perfect quarterback rating in Lambeau last week. I know the Packers defense has made some people look very good this year, but still impressive. Still impressive. And I didn't watch that whole game, obviously, but I have seen plenty of clips. And I mean, Baker's looking good. He's playing well. The ball placement is good. He obviously just got on the same page as best as he has all season with Chris Godwin. He and Mike Evans have had a good connection all season. And they get the Jags, who are giving up 20 points per game. The quarterback's third most in the NFL. So you like the matchup. You like the weapons. The player is playing well. And Baker is the quarterback 15 on the season, 16 or more points in 6 of his last 9 games. Like just coming off of a 29-point game, he's playing well. He's been solid all year. I think he is pretty soundly, in my mind, a top 12 quarterback this week, and is kind of ranked in between that 12 to 15 spot in ranks I see right now.
Yeah, I mean, he did a great start. Like you said, the Jags defense has been pretty terrible, and he has some of the best supporting cast you can ask for a quarterback who needs the help to get it done. They're also playing for a playoff spot, which always matters in games like this, and it could be a pretty positive script for them. I haven't seen the latest news on Trevor Lawrence, but it looked like he was still in concussion protocol, if I believe. So we don't even know.
It seemed like tomorrow we were going to, if he hit a certain benchmark tomorrow, he either would be likely or unlikely to play. So at the time you hear this podcast, we may know more about that.
Yes. Speaking of, I didn't know if you saw this, going back to Bijan, Tyler Heineke is starting the rest of the season.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we bet it, but Desmond Ritter's passing prop was 2,600 yards, and he said 25-18.
I don't think we did.
Well, so minus an injury, he will not hit his passing prop.
I mean, he found his way back last time, so
he did somehow, some way.
Okay, defensive stream of the week.
This one was a pretty hard one for me. It's not a good week for defenses, but I'm just going back to the well with last week's because they have to do better against New England, and I'm taking the Denver Broncos again. It was my advice that you'd want them throughout the playoffs. So they were my week Gibby defensive start of the week. My other one,
I was going to say, you literally have to say Denver this week because you said him last week, but not to start him last week, but to have him for this week.
If you're desperate, I know Washington's the worst defense in the league, but they get the worst offense in the
I
league.
looked at that one and I was like,
it's just an interesting conversation point. I don't know what I would do.
It's tempting, but
so is Green Bay.
You have
Green Bay.
Well, like you said, with the worst defense versus worst offense, sometimes the worst offense can get the better of the worst defense too.
Yes, it absolutely can. So just a little idea there. But I'm sticking with Denver. Washington could be interesting. I've seen a lot of people touting the Miami Dolphins on Twitter because they've played so well recently. They get Dallas, and people still think they're a startable team.
That over under is 51, by far the highest of the week.
Fool's gold. Do not take them. Stay away from Miami. But who do you have?
I have a fun one. Before I even say who it is, I just want to read off some of their key numbers in the last 5 weeks. So 5 weeks ago, 0 interceptions, 3 sacks, 13 points allowed. 4 weeks ago, 3 interceptions, 2 sacks, 31 points allowed. 3 weeks ago, 4 interceptions, 2 sacks, 10 points allowed. And then last week, last week, 3 interceptions. No, sorry, I skipped one. 2 weeks ago, 2 interceptions, 4 sacks, 13 points allowed. And then last week, 3 interceptions, 1 touchdown, 4 sacks, and 20 points allowed. Would it surprise you to know that is the Chicago Bears?
That would surprise me to know.
They have been playing very good defense and very opportunistic defense. And we talked about not loving what Kyler Murray has been putting forward so far this year. And that's the matchup this week, the Cardinals and Kyler Murray. So I kind of like the Bears in that spot this week.
Jalen Johnson is the highest rated corner on PFF right now, too. The cornerback for the Bears. I don't hate it. Like we said last week, Kyler Murray's still clearly not 100%. And they have a really lackluster receiving core outside of Marquise Brown. Michael Wilson was exciting while he was a thing. And then I know last week even James Conner got like 39% of the snaps. So they're really trying to work in more guys for opportunities to figure out how to get that offense rolling. Mm-hmm. I definitely don't hate that. Mathematically, they're not eliminated from the playoffs. Neither are 30 other teams in the NFL, but they could still do it.
The Bears are very much in the hunt part of the graphic, and they will stay there.
They will stay in the hunt.
They will stay there until they're not. But yeah, I mean, to have games of 3, 4, 2, and 3 interceptions in the last 4 games, like I just think you kind of have to ride that if you're desperate and looking.
Yeah, I think that's a good start. They should be available in most leagues because the general consensus around the Bears. But yeah, I think that's a good one.
All right, that is all on the fantasy playoffs and the redraft portion of this show. We're going to jump ahead to some dynasty talk, do a little bit of head-to-heads, basically how this is going to go. We're just going to give 2 players, and this is not going to be formatted like our debates where one of us has one side, one of us has the other side. We both may agree on some of these. I'm sure we will agree on some of these, but we're just going to do a little dynasty head-to-head. The first one, probably the biggest dynasty topic right now, is Bijan Robinson versus Jahmyr Gibbs, the 2 rookies, and it's Jahmyr Gibbs who has had the better season this year from a points per game basis. Now he's only, I think he's like RB16 to Bijan's RB11 or 12. That's because he missed 2 games. Bijan has played every game. We all remember the migraine/headache debacle, and then 0.1 points last week. So that has dropped his average.
Negative.
Yeah, negative 0.1. That dropped his average by a full point this year. And I'm sure in the headache game, he scored 0.3 points. So he's probably 2 points lower on his averages just based off of those 2 games. But who are you taking going forward? We kind of talked about this a little bit the other day, just you and I texting. And it's like, I still like Bijan, the player and the prospect, more. But you can't deny the situations that both guys are in right now. And you just can't deny that Gibbs has probably, in my mind, exceeded my expectations for this year. Because, you know, it's funny. No one's complaining about his touches right now. He just had 13 touches the other day. It's just that he turned it into over 100 scrimmage yards. I think he had at least 1 touchdown. Maybe it was 2 touchdowns. So, like, he's not really getting any heavier of a workload than he was earlier in the season for the most. A couple more touches here and there, but it was 11 carries, 2 receptions, and it's just he is very explosive. And it is nice when you can be the change of pace guy in the backfield like he is. He's kind of living a good life right now. Going forward, though, which of these two guys do you prefer?
It's close because I still think there's no denying the skill that Bijan possesses. But I ended up going with Jahmyr Gibbs.
Wow.
In part, it's how I would approach trading for a running back in any dynasty league. Is that I would probably trade them on a team that I'm trying to win games in. And there's a lot more question marks about where Atlanta goes. I think Ben Johnson for the Detroit Lions likely gets a head coaching job. I still don't think.
You know what's a fun thought? What if he's the Falcons head coach next year?
Then this debate looks really, really.
Lord, can you please do for Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson what you've done for Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta?
But I mean, it's insane what Jahmyr Gibbs has done. He's only 21 years old. He has a 15% target share. He has 6 yards per touch. He's averaging 17 points per game. He is RB9, and he's actually missed 2 full games this year, which is, I mean, Bijan kind of has, but it's more coaching. He's going to have over 65 receptions, have over 1,100 rushing yards on his current pace, and he's 3rd in the NFL in breakaway run rate and leads the NFL in 20-yard runs.
He has 39 evaded tackles this year too, and he's 5th, or I think I have him as 2nd in breakaway run rate. So either way, he's quite good at breaking big plays.
And if there's a David Montgomery season-ending injury next year, I mean, it could be to the moon. The addition of that offensive line is also what tilted it. The Detroit offensive line is significantly better. I feel more comfortable about the quarterback play in Detroit. And there are 2 impending free agents on Atlanta on their offensive line this offseason. They could re-sign them. But it's just there are more question marks going into the offseason about Atlanta than there are with Detroit. It will not surprise me if coming into redraft next year, I have these guys like 4 and 5. Like it's not a giant margin, but I like Jahmyr Gibbs. I also like the fact that we know he can do less or more with less, and we really haven't seen Bijan do that so far this season. And part of it's definitely play calling and coaching, but you at least want to see like what Breece Hall has done. Breece Hall has had some big plays despite the fact that his team is absolutely the bottom of the league in offense, and we have not seen that from Bijan for the most part.
Yeah. He's had a good season. Like I said, he's an RB1, and that's even with negative 0.1 points and also the headache game where he has 2 games where he's combined the score 0.2 points.
Yeah.
So for all intents and purposes, he's missed 2 games just like Jahmyr Gibbs has. But yeah, the obviously the key difference here, I have Bijan, full disclosure, but I think some of these that we're going to talk about, I think there's a clear right and wrong answer. This is one where I do think you can go either way and it's defensible. Now, I still have Bijan. I think he is the better player. The situation is definitely worse. That's the key difference. Quarterback, coaching, all of that. Situation is not forever. We don't know how long Atlanta is going to Atlanta could very easily trade for Justin Fields and have a new head coach next year. And maybe you feel different, and maybe I feel even better about Bijan than we do right now. I mean, Tyler Algier is there. He's cheap. He's still going to be there. But Bijan is good enough compared to Algier, where even though Algier is good, it could still be an 80-20, 70-30, 75-25 type of split between those two. Looking at Bijan, like he just profiles as a guy. I still don't think you want Gibbs having that many more touches than he's getting right now. And he's very efficient. Maybe he continues to just be kind of one of those guys like a Kamara, like he's been so far, where he kind of bends those rules where he can have 15 touches and be the RB6 in a season. But Bijan is 1st in routes run, 3rd in target share, and 2nd in route percentage amongst running backs. And we know what he can do running the ball. So like he just profiles as that guy who can be the true workhorse, 3-down guy who has the 1,600 yards rushing, 500 yards receiving, and mega touchdown type of year if things fall right. Whereas I just don't think Gibbs quite has that. in him. And, one advantage Gibbs has had outside of just the situation being better, he's seeing a lot more carries against light and base fronts than Bijan is this season. Bijan is seeing a lot more heavy and base. So the situation just obviously has been tilted for Gibbs. I just still believe in Bijan a little bit more than Jahmyr Gibbs, who, these are both top 5 dynasty running backs, to be clear.
Yeah, definitely top 5. The other concern I have, and I'm not going to overweight this and act like it's something that really weighs in my decision making, but I don't want to spend a long time saying, well, he was good in college, so he has to hit eventually, and overweight.
But he's rushed for over 1,000 yards this year.
Yeah,
so it's not like he hasn't been good this year. Just not what
Trent Richardson did his rookie year, but not drawing those comparisons. But I just don't want to overrate the college to what we've seen in the NFL.
Yeah.
And we know for sure that the contact balance for Jahmyr Gibbs, which was probably his best thing, has really translated over.
Yeah, no, for sure. Heath Cummings for CBS put up a poll today. No, who's the number 1 running back in Dynasty? And it was Bijan, Gibbs, or other. Other had 5% of the vote, and it was basically 48 to 47 in favor of Bijan. So it's close right now. Just out of curiosity, if we threw Breece Hall in this conversation, what would your ranking of those 3 guys be? We don't have to go in depth on Breece, obviously, but
I'd probably go Gibbs, Breece, Robinson, but be super close on all 3.
I think I'd go Breece Hall 1, Bijan 2, and Gibbs 3.
I would like to see the Jets rework that entire offensive line in the offseason, which I'm sure they will, considering what they're looking at. And it being a deep tackle class, they can get some guys in the second round if they have their pick. I don't even know if they do. Oh, they don't. They'll have their first. They won't have their second.
I was going to say that. Yeah, they'll have their first because Rodgers barely played, and they won't have their second. We'll answer this real quick before I forget as we keep going in the dynasty talk here. Half PPR, start Isaiah Likely or Jake Ferguson. I'm going Ferguson. Easier matchup, high point total. He's been quite involved. Whereas with Baltimore, it feels like you get a Likely game or you could get a heavy Odell, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers. I just feel safer about Ferguson's involvement in the offense, and the upside is pretty similar.
This is funny because I was actually looking at Ian Hartitz on Fantasy Life. I'm going to read it off now. Since the Mark Andrews injury, Isaiah Likely leads the team in targets, catchable targets, play action targets, and has the highest PPR rank of any pass catchers in Baltimore. I think I would lean Isaiah Likely in this one.
It's close. I think either way, both good options.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we got 2 more coming in. Oh, that's just thanks, guys. In full PPR, pick 1 running back, 1 receiver, 1 flex. Oh my gosh, this is a lot of people. Breece Hall, Zeke, Ty Chandler, Jonathan Taylor, I assume, Amari Cooper, Drake London, Chris Godwin. So I am just gonna go ahead and slot Breece Hall and Chris Godwin in. Do you agree?
Yeah.
If Alexander Madison doesn't play, are you considering Ty Chandler, or is this a Zeke versus Jonathan Taylor if he plays versus Amari Cooper?
It'd be.
I don't think you can start Drake London unless you really need upside.
Yeah, I would probably Taylor if he plays, especially with Zach Moss being injured. I think he gets close to that 75-85% work share.
If Taylor plays and no Zach Moss, I'm going Taylor. If Madison plays and Zach Moss plays and Jonathan Taylor plays, I'm going Zeke. There's just a lot of moving parts in this, so it's going to be a lot.
But I think Breece and Godwin you can lock in now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, next debate here. This one's going to be a doozy, I feel like. Not because we're going to disagree, I don't think, but this would be an interesting topic. Josh Jacobs versus Tony Pollard. 2 running backs who are about to be free agents, could both be tagged again, but maybe they're going to be on different teams, and that's always tricky when forecasting running backs, and also that rarely goes great for running backs at this stage, changing teams. So I don't feel fantastic about either guy, but if you had to pick one, Dalton, who would it be?
I think we're both going to agree on this one, but I'm taking Josh Jacobs.
Me too. And I believe I had it pulled up, on Keep Trade Cut, Josh Jacobs is the RB 15, Tony Pollard the RB 11, and I just could not disagree with that more.
Yeah, fantasy trade calculators suck for Dynasty. But Josh Jacobs is a full year younger than Tony Pollard, and
Yeah.
Tony Pollard will be entering his age 27 season. We're already you're pushing it at this point with running back production. We saw two 28-and-a-half-year-old running backs in Dalvin Cook and Austin Eckler completely fall off the age cliff this season. And I would not be surprised to see Tony Pollard get the Kareem Hunt treatment this offseason, where he's not even on the team come training camp. With the production he's put on the field, he hasn't been efficient. The Cowboys have elected to use Rico Dowdle more and more every week. In games where their offense is putting up 42 points, Tony Pollard is a non-factor. He does not have the explosiveness he's had. He's clearly not built for 20-plus touches.
He's been better down the stretch, Pollard has. Basically, ever since we completely demolished him on this podcast, he's put up better numbers. But still, it just doesn't fit. Like, he's a top 12 running back, but it's kind of like Bijan, where it's like, and especially with Pollard, he hasn't missed any games. It feels like for Pollard, it's more of an accumulation top 12 than he's made a big difference on your team type of top 12 season. And what you were about ready to say is exactly what my main point was going to be is, yeah, I know you can make the workload argument the other way, where it's like I have concern about Jacobs. He's had a million touches. Tony Pollard should be, quote unquote, fresher, even though he's older. But also, just like I agree with you, Jacobs has proven he can handle those touches and he can produce. He's been basically a top 15 to 20 running back his whole career. Had obviously the year last year where he was a lot better than that. And I think the main thing is this year, Jacobs hasn't been what we hoped because of the Raiders. Tony Pollard hasn't been what we hoped because of Tony Pollard.
Yep. I mean, that's the best way to boil down the entire argument. You could hope for a revival and that you can write this year off because of his ankle surgery for Tony Pollard. But I'm just not making a bet. At this point, we should have seen something like other guys, Breece Hall, Javonte Williams, both had, even J.K. Dobbins before he got injured again, all had terrible injuries and came back and looked pretty good after the fact within a year of their injury. And it's just not been the case for Tony Pollard. I don't think I would have to look, but he has not had major explosive runs this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's outside the top 24 running backs in that category.
Yeah, no, he definitely has not. Yeah, it has been just I don't even want to say volume because he's been getting less volume than you would probably think because they've been throwing the ball a ton this year, but still just as far as running back goes, he's getting decent volume and he's played all the games. And I really feel like, he's the RB11 on Keep Trade Cut. I feel like a year from now, we could be looking up and he's like the RB36 in Dynasty. I think I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I feel like that's on the table. Whereas like Josh Jacobs, I feel pretty secure as long as he's healthy, that he's going to be a top 15 to 20 guy next year. He's not even quite 25. He's still quite young.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I'll say on this is, and I feel pretty strongly about this in Dynasty, it's better to be a year early than a year late when it comes to trading running backs. And I'm definitely, if Pollard has a year, it's one more year. I could see Jacobs with two more productive seasons before he hits the fall off.
Yeah, and he's just the type of guy who's going to age better than Pollard anyway, because he's not great because of how explosive he is. He is explosive, but he's a big guy, like breaks tackles, makes guys, like Pollard is, was a guy shot out of a cannon. He's just not quite that anymore. Steven in the chat, do you mean Dynasty or do you mean start sit? I was assuming start sit, but I just want you to clarify before we answer that. In the meantime, Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Garrett Wilson. Another interesting one here that I'm curious if we're going to have our first disagreement. I'm going Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think it's very, very close. Like these guys are both top 8 Dynasty receivers. Start sit week 16. So Austin Eckler, I think we're pretty on record earlier, just going through the running backs that we probably don't want to start Eckler. He's probably more close to the Bijan range for us this week, which is closer to 30 than like 15. Keenan Allen, if he plays, I just don't see how you get away from him because of how good he's been this year.
Yeah, and that Buffalo defense has had some suspect coverage lapses. So, and Keenan Allen, I mean, if he plays, he's in line for 15, 16 targets. So definitely, if Keenan Allen is healthy and active, I would start Keenan Allen. If I can get off of Eckler, I'm getting off of Eckler.
For sure. Okay, Amon-Ra versus Garrett Wilson. I'm taking Amon-Ra. I feel like we talked about this a little bit with Amon-Ra a couple weeks back, where it's like people don't appreciate him because he's just not the most exciting player in the world, even though he has had more explosive plays this year than his first 2 years in the NFL. It's not like you're looking at a 27-year-old receiver versus a 23-year-old receiver. These guys are both young. They're about a year apart in age. And Amon-Ra St. Brown was a wide receiver 1 last year. He is the wide receiver 6 this year. So, I mean, this guy has had back-to-back years of awesome years. Now, Garrett Wilson, 1,100 yards last season. He will be around 1,000 yards this season. Yeah, I mean, who knows? He could have 3 games where he has like 45 combined yards, or he could have 150 yards this week. But he still had a good season given what is around him. But at the same time, like, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown is kind of quarterback proof. He works that intermediate area better than anybody in the NFL, really, as a receiver. Right now, he's just going to be a high volume guy. I understand the max high end outcome for Garrett Wilson is probably higher than Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I mean, you look at his quarterback situation next year, it's Aaron Rodgers at 39 off a torn Achilles, or what is the other plan exactly? Like, the coaching staff is a mess. Are they going to be back? I don't know, but if they are, I'm also not feeling great. I would assume they probably are back because, like, they brought in Rodgers. Those are Rodgers guys, and he's probably going to be their quarterback next year. Like, again, this is a guy, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He and Jamar Chase have been in the NFL for the same amount of time. He has 400 fewer receiving yards than Jamar Chase. Not to say he is on the same tier as Chase in Dynasty, because he's not. Like, Chase is wide receiver 2. Amon-Ra St. Brown probably like 4 or 5, but there's a gap there for sure. But he has been awesome, and he is young, and he is the more consistent player. And even when you look at Garrett Wilson compared to like Chris Olave, that's kind of always been my thing with favoring Olave over Garrett Wilson, even going back to college, is I think Olave is just more consistent on a play in, play out basis, whereas Garrett Wilson will have those flashes. But then, like, you see what Jalen Ramsey said after that game the other day against the Jets?
I didn't.
He held Garrett Wilson. It was like 3 for 29. And he basically was like, yeah, it was kind of a boring game. And like that to me probably says that, yeah, obviously the Jets are a mess, but also like Garrett Wilson probably wasn't busting his ass even on plays where he wasn't getting the ball either.
Well, it is the same corner called Tyreek Hill, a punt returner. So
yes, that's true. I'm not taking what he says as gospel, but I just thought that was that was a little bit notable to me.
So I'm taking Garrett Wilson.
Okay.
I agree with you in a lot of ways. Like, it is incredibly close. Just some things that stand out to me. Garrett Wilson's 3rd in the league in separation on routes run. He has 3 yards of separation. If you've listened to any of Robert Saleh or Nathaniel Hackett when they get asked about the offense,
I try not to.
Yeah, they always just say our receivers are open, and they usually are. Mostly Garrett Wilson. He is 6th in the NFL in average targets. He has 140, and in spite of that, he is the wide receiver, I think, 19, because this offense has been horrific. He's one of those guys where once he hits, it's going to be like we all thought this was going to happen eventually. And I think he has like full on wide receiver 1 in his outcomes, like the overall wide receiver 1.
I mean, Amon-Ra's wide receiver 6 right now, so he probably.
I mean, too. Like a breaking kind of like season, like an Antonio Brown-esque season where he goes off for like 1,800 yards. And we're like, this guy's the guy, which is really the only thing because he has a high end outcome. I don't have anything bad to say about Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like, there's nothing. I wouldn't fault somebody for doing a straight up 1-to-1 on those two guys, or even like Amron and a 2 for Garrett and a 2 for Amron right now. But long term, I would prefer to have Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, I agree with you. This one's close as well. Whereas, like, I think the Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, that has to be Josh Jacobs, even though Keep Their Chet doesn't have it that way. This one, like the first one, it can be either way. I am going to say Jimbo in the chat. I don't know about Dalton. I am going to abstain from giving start-sit advice for our own league because I don't want to open that can of worms and also be yelled at if things go a certain way, one way or another from either side on that one.
Yeah, I'm cheering for the Skunks this week, Jimbo.
Well, that was your chance to help the Skunks then. Okay, next one up, and boy, these next two to me, I do feel like are kind of toss-ups. This one was the one I had the most trouble with. T. Higgins versus Michael Pittman, Dalton. Who are you taking here? They're back to back on keep trade cut right now.
I had a lot of trouble on this one too.
Mm-hmm.
Both are pending free agents. I think Pittman probably lands back in Indy. I don't think the economics work out of T. Higgins ending up in Cincy without some fun cap manipulation. I ended up taking Michael Pittman.
I took T. Higgins.
Okay. And I didn't feel great either way.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up what led me to Michael Pittman was I just took the guy who's like showed it to me for a couple of years, and just T. Higgins' inconsistency since his rookie season has been frustrating. I mean, he had like the 9-drop game this year.
I don't think it was not. It was not 9.
He was like 2. Well, I'm sorry. His targets. He was like 2 for 11 or whatever. It was like week 1 or 2. It was a very frustrating game. And that part of that's what swayed my decision. And then I just ended up going with the guy who does one thing really well, which Michael Pittman leads the NFL in first read target share. He leads the NFL on EPA on targets as the first read, and he's 4th in the NFL on RPOs in fantasy points. All of those are things that the Shane Steichen offense in Indy has kind of relied on. And if he returns to Indy, I think it's even better with Anthony Richardson. No offense to the year Gardner Minshew's having. So part of it was I think he's going to be back in Indy. I like that. The other part of it was I just need to see like a complete season out of T. Higgins to get my full understanding of it. I don't think that the people knocking him for being second in the NFL in drop percentage is right. We've talked about it over and over again. Drops don't correlate year to year unless you're Kadarius Toney.
Yeah, and he has. I said this morning when you sent that stat. He has like a 3.4% drop rate for his career before this year.
So I'm not faulting him for those things. And the last thing is Michael Pittman is just a better separator. So I'm more confident he's like quote unquote QB proof if they both end up in different systems this year. Like if T. Higgins ends up in Carolina, like they're probably going to be in the market for a wide receiver. I would not feel incredibly confident in his first year in Carolina about how that would play out. I would feel a little more confident about Michael Pittman in Carolina, although that is like a death sentence for both of them.
I don't want any of them to go to Carolina, please.
But I think it's really close, and I think I'm glad that we finally had the Pittman breakout year because he's a guy that we've both been fans of and said is better than we thought. I was down on him his rookie year, but after that, I got on board.
So I don't hate your call because obviously, like I said, I struggled with this. I actually going into it thought I was going to say Pittman and ended up swinging back to T. Higgins. But I do want to just correct one thing here. So T. Higgins actually has been the better performer until this year, the last couple of years, than Michael Pittman. It was wide receiver 17 to 23 last year. And then I think points per, because I talked about this when he was a my guy earlier this year. He was a wide receiver 12 each of the last 2 years in points per game. And then 2 years ago, he was the wide receiver 22. Oh, Pittman was 15. So they have flipped. So it wasn't back to back. So they've basically gone back. They've alternated years who's been better and who's been
And
worse.
To clarify, when I say put it together, last year Michael Pittman played with the carousel of quarterbacks, and T. Higgins got a top 5 quarterback. But
in 2021, okay, so Pittman was 11.4 points per game. T. Higgins was 13. So T just obviously missed time that year. But yeah, this is really hard because they're both free agents. They're both very good but not great wide receivers, and they're both have been in very different situations their first 3 years. 3 years of their careers. 4 years. Sorry. Whereas Pittman has not had a good quarterback situation really ever. This year's been okay, and that is the apex of what he's seen. T. Higgins had 1 year without Burrow, and he was good that year. So it's not like, yes, he's not QB proof, but also it's not like he's fallen off a cliff, which I'm not saying that's what you said, but he's not fallen off a cliff when he's had, worse quarterback play. He had Burrow, but Burrow got hurt that year. So he barely had Burrow.
He tore his ACL.
Yeah. And then T. Higgins has been the 1B to Jamar Chase's 1A. And we know Jamar Chase is, like, I know people like to say T. Higgins is good, and I love T. Higgins, but he's not. He's not the same class as Jamar Chase. And Pittman has been the clear number one. So you look at things like just target share and stuff like that. And Pittman's always had that edge, like a 30% to 20% type of edge over T. Higgins. But Pittman is more of a, like you mentioned, RPO, an 8-ish type of A dot compared to T. Higgins, who's like a 12 to 13 type of A dot, which is how they end up with similar air yardage shares despite a volume difference. So they're different players, similar caliber, different situations. So you just kind of have to pick your preference. And I'm going to take the guy that I think just has higher upside on a week-to-week basis in T. Higgins. And now this could change if T. Higgins goes to Carolina and Michael Pittman goes back. But also T. Higgins could go to New England with Drake May, to Kansas City. There's a lot of moving parts with both of those guys. I look at like yards per route run. They're very similar. This year, T. Higgins is a little bit down, 1.59. Pittman is at 2, but in 2022, T. Higgins was 2.09. So like they're just so close in players. And also the other thing is, like, honestly, maybe my last tiebreaker here was age. Pittman is kind of sneakily a little over a year older than T. Higgins. So you have that going for you from T. Higgins' side. And it's just like, I really wanted to have this conversation. Number one, to give Pittman his flowers. And number two, like, I think T. Higgins is probably going to be one of the best buy lows in Dynasty this offseason, as long as he doesn't have, like, he just had a great game, but it could have been even better without a drop or two the other day, even. As long as he doesn't have great games to finish out the season, which he may without Chase, he's going to be a great buy low, because it has been as bad as it could have been for a lot of reasons this year. He played poorly in stretches. He's been injured in stretches. And also, when he was healthy earlier in the season, that was largely when we were getting the Joe Burrow that could not move, and their offense was quick game to Jamar Chase, which is not T. Higgins' game. It's just not. He's, over the middle, down the sideline, longer developing, and the Bengals just could not do that earlier this season. So there's just been a lot that has gone against T. Higgins this year. I just want people to not be too down on him after what's happened this year.
Yeah, well, and again, I think another team that'll be in the running, and we'll talk about them next, is the Jaguars. They're going to be looking for a wide receiver one. And either of these guys there, I would probably say that's a huge increase in their value, where they get to be the alphas in those offenses. The one thing I would advise is, if you're heading into, or you already have your trade open in your Dynasty League, is both these guys, I would not trade for them until I see their landing spots. There's going to be a huge reshuffling on the wide receiver boards, and this draft is incredibly deep.
The only caveat would be is if it becomes clear at a certain point that T. Higgins is not going back to Cincy, and you can get a panic sell.
Yes.
T.
Like
Higgins.
If someone's offering you a 2 because they love a guy in the draft near your rookie draft, and T. Higgins is still an unsigned free agent, absolutely. But I wouldn't go and sell 2 1s, which I think is what both these guys are worth for them, until we know where they land.
Yep, agreed with you there. All right, you mentioned the Jaguars. Let's get into it with Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Fields, which I wish I could have found the tweet, but they have shockingly close yardage totals and touchdown totals since they've entered the NFL. The narrative has been wildly different about one guy than the other. That is obviously a variety of reasons. You can dig into that. Some that we may not just want to discuss on this podcast, and then others like team success, and part of that being a lack of throwing ability for one, whereas the other has flashes of brilliance and flashes of not brilliance. But Trevor Lawrence versus Justin Fields, to me, I think this is a real toss-up, which is, I'm a little confused. I see Lawrence like top 8 or 9 and Fields as low as QB 14 and like in the QB 11 to 14 range. I think these guys are like back to back, and I would give the very slight edge to Trevor Lawrence, but I'm curious what your take is before we dive deeper into that.
Obviously, I've not been a huge fan of Justin Fields. I think he's been a big improvement this year in a lot of ways. Some of his, and I know this is like a weak take, but some of his stats this year are so incredibly bloated by the Washington game where he threw 13 completions to one receiver and no completions to anybody else, which I'm just, that is very concerning that it was DJ Moore who did everything that game. It was not Justin Fields. And the other problem I have with Justin Fields Twitter, there were a lot of look at how he didn't lose the game against the Browns last week. This was a wide open. It should have been caught. It was a good pass. But
there was another drop by Tunyon down the sidelines too. That was very MVS-esque.
If you watch a full game of Justin Fields, it is not this highlight reel experience. He has very bad plays. He is a very up or down quarterback. I'm taking Trevor Lawrence here. Obviously, I'm not going to write Justin Fields off. He'd probably be in my top 12 for dynasties. Mm-hmm. I would put Trevor Lawrence closer to my top 7. For one, so in the NFL right now, throwing a wide receiver screen on first or second down correlates to a negative EPA of 0.03, which is the same as having Zach Wilson drop back to pass for you. On first and second down, the Jaguars are the team with the highest wide receiver screen total. So that's a discount. Among active quarterbacks right now, Trevor Lawrence is third in EPA lost on drop balls. Mahomes is famously first on this one. And there are some very obvious games early in the season, especially where drops cost Trevor Lawrence pretty badly. Yeah. I do have outstanding questions about how, what Trevor Lawrence's ceiling is. But in Dynasty, I feel more confident that he's going to continue to have a job, that his organization is going to build around him and try to make it better.
Yeah.
And that this offseason will be another good one for him. They're probably going to draft a tackle. They're probably going to come in and bring an actual alpha, because I don't think Calvin Ridley ended up being what we wanted him to be or what we thought he was going to be.
No, although I sent this tweet to you from Ian Hartitz, and it was he was, I think, kind of joking, but also being a little bit serious, where it's next year we're going to be well, look what the Jaguars are going to do now. They got these guys, and then it's going to be the same thing, and we're going to be oh, because I understand Ridley hasn't maybe had the season we hoped for, but I think Ridley's been pretty good. I would kill for Ridley on the Chiefs, kill for Ridley on the Chiefs. And Christian Kirk has been Evan Ingram is really good. Their biggest issue is offensive line.
Yes. The last thing I'll say about it, and this relates to Ian Hartitz, goes both ways, in my opinion. It's just there's a lot of excuse making for Justin Fields' performances over 3 years. And I said this at the start of the season, the rope has to stop eventually, and a quarterback has to eventually do something to prove that they're that guy. Trevor Lawrence survived the terrible Urban Meyer year, and it was a terrible year for him in fantasy. He came back and he posted a QB 11 performance. Justin Fields did have a very good year to end last season, but it's turning into well, they need to draft another tackle. They need to draft another option outside DJ Moore. They fired their offensive coordinator, and it's you have so many moving blocks in this Chicago offense, and you don't even know if he's going to be in Chicago starting next year, that I am reticent to want to invest in that type of player when I can get a player at the quarterback position who's going to continually be my guy. He's going to be in Jacksonville for 5 to 8 more years.
And that's what I was going to say. I think just looking at this, the most likely next move as it relates to Trevor Lawrence in Jacksonville is an extension. The most likely next move as it relates to Justin Fields in Chicago is a trade. Would that actually be for the better? Maybe it would be. Maybe
he goes to Atlanta and Ben Johnson becomes the head coach of Atlanta, and I'm through the moon.
Yeah, maybe he goes to Atlanta. Maybe he goes, I don't know, Seattle. There are
Minnesota.
There are teams where he in division probably not.
Yeah,
although TJ Hawkinson got traded in division.
True.
But there are places he could go that would be more exciting than Chicago for sure. So this is not because he's not going to be in Chicago, I am more down on Justin. It's not that, but you feel more secure about Trevor Lawrence's future by and large in the NFL than you do Justin Fields. And it's not that Fields hasn't played good enough to be a starter. He's going to be a starting quarterback next season, unless the Bears do a thing where they just don't trade him. But I can't. That would be unbelievable. The thing with Lawrence, I'm going to take Lawrence here still, obviously, but really the main conversation point I wanted to kind of drive home is that he's just not. I think we can give up on him being that generational quarterback that we hoped for coming in. And after year one, it's like, yeah, Urban Meyer, that was so bad. Like, what can you even take from that? Really nothing. Let's hope that year two is better. And year two was better. It was pretty good. And we had big hopes. I had huge hopes. I said he was going to be in the Burrow, Josh Allen tier of quarterback after this year. And I think that notion is dead in my mind. Like, I don't think he's ever going to get there. I think he's going to be more in that tier of like a Matthew Stafford, where it's like QB 6 to QB 10 most years. He's going to have great games. He's going to have mind-numbingly dumb games and make mind-numbingly dumb decisions and drop the ball when he's running sometimes just out of nowhere. Like, it's going to be more of a roller coaster than we had thought, just based on the prospect that we were hoping for coming out of college with Lawrence. And one thing to kind of drive that home with Lawrence this year versus the blitz, he's at a 55% completion rate, 820 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 4 picks. Against non-blitzes, he is a 69% completion percentage, 2,700 yards, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions as per PFF. And that is just to say, this is a guy who has all the tools and just he's not processing it like he should be. And he's in year 3. Can that change? Maybe, but it seems unlikely that the switch is just going to flip to get him to that elite level at this point.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing that really helped me when I looked it up, Steven Ruiz for the Ringer does a QB rankings and he updates them weekly. The start of the year, he also does a lot of talking to head coaches and GMs about what quarterbacks they think are best in the NFL. And he had Trevor Lawrence is 5th in the NFL right now, despite the poor play, despite the horrible pass decision.
Well, it's like he makes throws like the one he made the other night against the Ravens, that out route that went about an inch over the fingertip of, I think it was Patrick Queen, where it's like Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. Those are the guys who are making that throw on a rope like that. But then he just does a lot of other things that make you scratch your head.
Yeah. And with Justin Fields, there's still the timing concern. He doesn't really get guys in stride on their routes, and a better offensive line would help with that. What I thought was interesting about this debate is, what if I just throw a wild card at you and ask you, what about Brock Purdy?
I'm still taking Lawrence over Purdy. My thing with Purdy is it's great now, but I wish I had this tweet in front of me. I don't even think I sent it to you, and I should have. I saw it this morning, where it's like George Kittle is ESPN's #1 tight end in whatever metric they're using right now. Deebo Samuel is the #1 yak guy in the NFL, and then Brandon Ayuk is just the #1 wide receiver in whatever stat that you. And so, like, when his contract gets to where that can't be his surrounding talent, what is he? And I know we've got some time before that, but like, I don't look very far ahead outside like 2-3 years at the most in Dynasty. Outside of quarterback, I want to project a little bit more for quarterback, because these are guys you can have on your team for a decade and be awesome if you're right.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I was just curious where you landed on that, and that's really what skews the. I don't think it's close. For me, I think I would take Lawrence in almost all situations, just because I'm confident he's going to be there for a while. And not to say like this is the most probable outcome, but Justin Fields gets traded, goes to another team. They underutilize his skill set. He gets benched. He becomes this perennial like journeyman guy. He's never a consistent starter. You never trust him in his outings. Like that is not a range of outcomes that even exists for Trevor Lawrence, but that exists for Justin Fields at this point.
One last interesting question with this, and without even naming a quarterback who we have a preference of or anything like that, because we keep it tight to the vest on the rookies until we have our rookie draft in our Dynasty League for the upcoming rookies. If you have the option between just taking your pick at a rookie quarterback or Trevor Lawrence, which would you prefer?
I mean, I really like Drake May.
Well, see, I gave you the chance not to go out and say which one you liked better.
I really like Drake May. I think he's kind of. He threw a touchdown pass with his left hand, and he's not left-handed. I would take either of the rookie quarterbacks this year, the top two, over Trevor Lawrence. And speculatively, a lot has to fall a certain way. Jaden Daniels does kind of excite me. He's another guy. I would not take him over Lawrence right now, but he's a guy who I could see a year or two from now, people being like, it kind of made sense. He is the same archetype as Trey Lance, Anthony Richardson.
Well, I saw someone call him the Anthony Richardson of this draft today, and I was like, I'm interested to see what people say about him.
Yeah, he's a very explosive player, and if he, the Ringer, the Athletic, Robert Mays and Brugler talk about prospect to pros, and they think he can sneak into like the top 8 of the NFL draft. Which he get very exciting.
He's mocked inside the top 10 by Brugler, I think, right now.
Yeah, and if that happens, and if he ends up in like a good situation with a coach who's forward thinking, I could see talking myself into Jaden Daniels over Trevor Lawrence.
I'll just say I'll take my pick of the rookie quarterback in the draft without outing anything more than that at this current point in time. Speaking of our league, Dalton, real quick before we get out of here, we can give just quick picks of the semifinals. As you mentioned, the Mighty Melon Heads are sadly no more. It is Troll moving on to play the machine that is Ty Miller in the semifinals. Who are you going with between Ty and Noah in the semis?
I don't mean to disparage anybody, but I think winner of this wins the league.
Well, we're definitely, as I look at my projections and see myself projected for the highest amount of points in the league this week, that's always fun. Can't wait for my team just to ball the hell out in the 5th place game. And then I look and see, Noah, Toledo Tanks in the consolation. I see Brian in the consolation, and it's just like 3 of the top 5 teams are not currently still in it right now. So I agree with you. And this is what happens in fantasy football all the time when you don't have any other when you don't do like a doubleheader, when it's just straight matchups, and then obviously in playoffs when it's win or go home, and that's just what happens. And the bracket fell a certain way where Noah and I both played last week, and that's just what happens. But not discredit those two guys on the other side, J-Law and Eli. Their teams have both done quite well, especially lately for J-Law. But I am going to take Ty right here. Like, I know Trill just put up 130 on me last week, which is like what everyone's done for the last 6 weeks, for the most part. But he had to have 2 guys score 3 touchdowns apiece to do it. Whereas, like, if Ty scores 130, it just feels like, Ty's team just had a pretty good day today. Like, Ty's team is just so loaded.
Yeah, I mean, I have Ty as well. I think Dak bounces back against Miami.
Yeah.
And then, like, on his bench, he has Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, Keenan Allen. And then it's just very unfair how deep he is. If Tyreek Hill is not a go, it doesn't even really affect him. Obviously, it hurts a little bit.
It affects him. He's like the MVP of the fantasy fantasy football, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm taking Ty. And then you have, like, he has Evan Ingram, and it looks like Zay Jones is out, so it's going to be the Evan Ingram, Calvin Ridley show. I think it's just leading his way for a win this week. And then, like, Noah's quarterback situation is going to hurt him. He has Russell, Tommy DeVito, and Derek Carr. Like, there's no good options to start. And he needs another 3 touchdown game. I also didn't see that he was flexing Sam Laporta and starting David Njoku.
Well, Njoku's had probably 2 best games of his life.
I don't disagree, but
back to back. But yeah,
you have a guy flexing a tight end against a guy who has Keenan Allen comfortably on his bench with DeAndre Swift and Aaron Jones.
Yeah. All right. On the other side, we have Eli and J-Law. That is a 5-point difference in the projection right now. I'm going to go with the underdog here. I'm going with J-Law in this matchup to continue the unbelievable run and make the finals. And I think my issue right now for Eli is that he has to start Kyler Murray this week because no CJ Stroud again, it's looking like. And I just don't feel good about that. I mean, maybe Jonathan Taylor doesn't play, but also like J-Law scored over 100 points last week without Jonathan Taylor. If he gets Taylor without Zach Moss, that's a big boost. He has your star of the week. He has my star of the week and James Cook and Devontae Smith. Like, it's just lining up pretty well for him this week, in my opinion.
I'm taking Eli.
Okay.
I don't have any reason why I'm taking him. We just saw the Dallas offense get exposed by the run game, and if they just let Mostert and he plays the full game and he has 30 touches for 200 yards, that's how Eli wins. That's a probable outcome.
To be clear, that is not the only way Eli can win. There are other ways.
Rashad White, against all of the disrespect on this podcast, continues to win.
I will continue the disrespect. I don't care. He is trash.
And then Nick Mullins seems to lock in on Jordan Addison. So Jordan Addison's around. He's going to get favorable coverages now that JJ's back. And Trey McBride is
I am nervous about Addison, though. Like, he had a good week last week, but he was fingertips away from a very different week.
And then just Trey McBride has been
that's locked in.
An incredible tight end this season. And
how Eli wins is the Cardinals play well, because if Murray to McBride happens this week, it's going to be hard to overcome that.
Yes. And then Thursday night sport starts. I think AK has a good game against the against the Rams. And I believe in Eli. I think Eli will bring home a title for Salina, Kansas.
A title? You're picking him over Ty preemptively?
I'm picking him over anybody. We ride with the Skunks.
A phrase never before said on this podcast. That is going to do it for episode 130 of the Half Point Per Podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter, Instagram, and the TikTok, Half Point Per Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube, Half Point Per Podcast. We will answer start-sit questions unless you're in our league asking about our league. Sorry, J-Law. Link to all those things in the show notes. As always, the show is available any way you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all of that good stuff. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Merry Christmas, happy holidays. Best of luck to everybody in their fantasy semifinals, and we'll talk to you again next week.